Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly video for you on this little guy right here. This is the Sandrin Knives Torino. Very interesting knife, and I'm looking forward to getting inside there. To start with, the initial condition here, we are roughly centered, maybe slightly favoring the show side, but it doesn't really matter because the blade is, well, very thin, meaning that you can hardly tell, right? Just in case you're wondering, no, I did not scuff up the blade finish. That's how it came. Aside from that, let's check for play. No play, vertical or horizontal. The thing that's making this very interesting to me is that this is a modification. They're calling this, I believe, the Recoil Lock, but this is based on a design by Snecx, who is a, is that a free spinning pivot? Sorry, Snecx is not a free spinning pivot, to the best of my knowledge. As far as I'm aware, free spinning pivots have not become sentient and started making knives. But Snecx is a pretty well-known designer, and he has created this particular lock. So let's go ahead and take this apart, and I'm curious to see what it ends up looking like. If you're curious about any of the tools I'm using during this disassembly, nickshabazz.com/tools has all those details and more. Okay, looking at this carefully here, I can remove the pivot, as I have just done. That's good. And then what I'll do is, looks like I have to switch to T6 in the back here. I was on T8 previously. Pop this out, and that was easy enough. And then I will pop this little guy out right here. And I believe this should have us ready to disassemble. I'm going to just pop this scale off gently, because I don't know what kind of springitude is inside here. This is a new lock to me. In practice, it sure feels a lot like sort of an axis lock, shock lock sort of affair, but we're going to see what's going on. Not that those two locks are the same thing, mind you, but they're just, in some ways, philosophically similar. Okay, there was a little spring in there. All right, so now we get a sense of what's going on here. There is a pin, okay, so there's a pin right here that this slides against, and then there's an internal pin. So what I'm going to do here, just for my own personal edification, if you will, is try and demonstrate how this lock works. So basically, this lives here. It goes around the back of this guy here. Okay, yeah. So how this works is that when the knife is locked, it cannot go anywhere because there is this little piece of metal here. This is sort of like a compression lock, but it's inserted from the back rather than from the side. A compression lock has a leaf that comes in from this direction, like a liner lock. This is sort of a axis lock banged a compression lock. But anyways, so then this piece slips into here, and then that prevents it from closing. When I pull this back, the lock is able to close, and then the detent is accomplished by virtue of this force here, which is the force required to disengage. So actually, the angle of this little lip here is going to be very important. Okay, this makes sense. I like this. This is good. And then when you open it, it springs all the way forward because of this little spring here, which, by the way, has a nice little holder there, which will prevent it from auto-yeeting across the room. But there you go. So that's how this guy works, and that is this locking assembly. Very straightforward. We see that it is... Okay. Got me a spring. I like how this spring managed to send itself across the room without even being under tension. It's impressive. But anyways, pretty straightforward, right? Let's go ahead and clean this guy up. I've been looking forward to this for a little while now, but been busy this disassembly. By the way, I am a man who looks forward to knife disassemblies. This is, yeah. Normal's just a setting on the dishwasher. Anyways, so yeah, this is an interesting piece. The Torino here is, the important part about this knife, of course, is the blade, right? No one would give a damn about this knife if it weren't for this blade. The blade, of course, being made of the polyhedral, I believe, tungsten carbide, which is how they're, why they're doing everything in the way that they're doing here, but it's super thin. It's very impressive stuff. I've had it before on the Sandrin Torino, as well as on the, the Lanzo, I forget which one. Either way, as well as the TCK series. But the blade material is sort of the news here. The rest of it, and much like all of Sandrin's knives, right, this knife is a life support system for a blade. right? They have that thing, right? They have the blades. The blades are impressive. Everything else is just sort of like in service of getting that out in the world. But this really does feel like they're, because the previous ones, the Delatorre is the first one that really felt like a pocket knife to me. And, you know, the other ones were like proof of concept-y stuff. But this is going a step further. This is like a working knife. It's got a lock on it, which is an important safety feature, right? This feels like they're really trying even harder to go sort of towards the functional approach rather than trying to make something that's a little fancier. And indeed, they have gone decidedly not fancy. So I think we are all set here and ready to reassemble. I'll want to clean off this pivot a little bit more just to make sure. Just rotating it here against this cloth, which cleans the rest of it off. Now everything should go back together smoothly, he says, dreaming. All right, so I'm going to use some 10-weight nano oil here, just because that's a reasonable choice when you've got bearings, but knife pivot lube would work just as well here. And I'm going to go ahead and just drop this in place. There we go, beautiful. Okay, now what I do is I put in the pivot, and I'm rebuilding this from the proper side. Yes, that's good. What I mean by that is that all the screws are coming in from the right area. Okay, clean this out, good. And just putting a little bit of lubrication onto this area here. That's way too much lubrication, but what else is new? X on Shabazz is a thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop this little pin into this liner. That way all of the protruding bits, and actually I'm doing it backwards. I don't know that the pin orientation matters, but it sure doesn't hurt to get it, you know, the same. Oh, there went my pivot. But there went my bearing. Well then. And the problem, of course, is that the clip is on the back side here, so the pivot doesn't want to stay in position. There is a solution to nearly every problem. Actually, I don't know that I can say that, but there's a solution to many problems in the world. Some problems just suck. But in this case, the solution to that problem is to put some cloth underneath there. And there we go. Now I drop this into position. Now what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of lubrication here. There is no stop pin to lubricate, but what I am going to go ahead and do is just while I've got it open here, put a little bit along the tang of the blade here, because that's where this recoil lock bit is going to be sliding. And then actually while I'm at it, I'm just going to go in ahead. And by the way, it's worth noting that this has two sides to it. One has a bearing race in it, the other side does not. Did I do that properly on the other side here? I did, yeah. Okay, good. Bearing race is in place there. So you just want to make sure you're getting that right, you know? All right. And so far, I got to say, I'm impressed with the lock here. It's worked well. One thing that I will probably end up doing in the future is knocking down this corner here. Let me highlight that. This is one of the things I'm going to be highlighting as the ugly when I talk about this knife already, I know, for the review, because they've put this sharp little corner on the piece that you have to use your thumb to grab back against, right? They put jimping there, but don't end the jimping abruptly in a sharp bit. That doesn't make sense. So, but I'll probably end up, if I end up keeping this knife, knocking that bit down a little bit, and because that'll just make for a more comfortable carry experience generally. But for the moment, leave it as it is, because it's better to review it in a relatively stock state, right? Okay, he says, just eating screwdrivers. All right. I hope sincerely that somewhere every time I say the word yeet, there is a, well, Gen Z kid cringing. Just because that would bring me joy, right? Okay. I am a slight bit of a sadist in that sense. All right. This spring is going to yeet itself out of here. It's going to happen. The question is just whether it does it before or after I get the scale on. Okay. Oh, people, come off it. Stay. Stay. Good boy. All right, now we put that there. I drop this into place. And now I need to... what's wrong here? There are a couple of wrongs here. One is the pivot is wacky. Part of this whole thing is probably the recoil lock being in the wrong position. There we go. Okay, see, what I just did there was I withdrew, I pulled back on the recoil lock just a little smidge. And what that did is it allowed me to snap everything back in there together. This is often the case as you're working with a pocket knife because the locking mechanism, by definition, will be under a little bit of tension when the knife is closed. That's sort of how locking mechanisms generally work. And so if you're trying to take the knife, put the knife back together with the, blade fully deployed, you often need to pull back on the lock. That's just or manipulate the lock to unlock the knife as you're doing this. I'm going to put a little bit of thread locker on here, using some blue thread locker. So now that I've done that, everything is sort of snapped into position. I'm going to put this pivot. Something ain't quite right here. Oh, I probably just need to do it again. Get everything in position, but the pivot isn't quite snugging into the G10. Oh, now it is. Okay. So, okay, the pivot is now in position. That's good. Oh, but my back here is not. Okay. So what I'm seeing here is that there are two approaches at this point. One of them, oh, look, okay, see, there's a little tiny bit of the spring stuck inside the that hole there. It's kind of popped in there. What I'm going to try and do is use this little tool here. This is a watch spring bar tool to get in there and pull the spring out of the way. When I do that, there we go. Oh, yeah. I made that look maybe not easy, but I made it look tractable, which is good. Yeah, what I did is I pulled the spring out of the way, and then I pulled the tool out before, and then I pinched the thing shut so that the spring wasn't able to get back into its negative position. It's, well, negative. Who am I to judge its deleterious position? Causing some difficulties here. Before I got... everything went back to normal. Where is that other screw? Ah, here it is. Okay, so that must be that one. I need to switch back to T6 for some reason. The elephant in this particular knife's room is the aesthetic. The knife is not exactly what a lot of people would picture a $200 knife to look like. In fact, it's got a lot of Milwaukee fastback going. Those vibes are very real. And so, as a result, I think this has been a very controversial knife from its outset. The Knife Nuts podcast people have... Okay, something's not quite right here. I think the pivot is just not tight enough. So let's fix this. Okay, good. That's too tight, I think. There is no play, vertical or horizontal, which is good. Yeah, pivot's just too tight. Let me loosen that up just a little bit. There we go, that's better. No play. I think I can loosen this a little bit more and get a better action still. No play. Oh, a little bit of vertical play there. Vertical play. Interesting. Okay. Let's tighten the pivot back up and see. Every time you'd learn a new lock, you'd learn, how to tweak that new lock, how to make things easier. Okay, no play. I bet that I have over-tightened this back screw, and by over-tightening this back screw, the pivot is not allowed to go, the lock bar is not allowed to go as far forward as it needs to. And that's going to cause some difficulty with the locking. Yeah. No play. Shuts easily. Centering's good to go. Yeah, I think that was my issue. Little tiniest bit of play there. Let's see if I can tighten the pivot a little bit more. Interesting. Why is vertical play suddenly a thing? Why would it be a thing? One thing that's kind of interesting about this knife is that it doesn't seem like the washes are equally distant. It seems like one of them is sticking out much further than the other one. The blade itself feels like it's rubbing along one side but not the other. I don't know what that's about. To be fair, this amount of vertical play is negligible. Like, this is, if I were not me, I would not be talking about it even. But being a picky bastard, it's sort of where we end up. Interesting. I'm going to try, now that I've got the pivot fully tightened, I'm going to try and loosen both of these guys with hopes that that'll free some things up. Could it maybe be that I need to snap this all together? Okay, the play is gone. So my thinking is that I had these back screws a little bit over-tightened. And as a result, it was sort of trapping the lock bar in a position where it wasn't ideal. So now I've loosened those up a little bit, or I'm tightening those up a little bit. There we go, we're closed. Very little play. If I press this forward, it should remove all the play. Because the vertical lock bar, because, you know, the play is going to come about when you've got, because remember you got that little super lock thing, that needs to go into a very specific gap between the post up here and the blade tang down here. And the play comes when this gap is bigger so the blade can do one of these things. And so it's designed to wedge in there a little bit. And, you know, the question here is whether it's got enough distance, basically, to move forward the wedge. This is, yeah, it's like a vertical compression lock. It really is. Seems to keep the blade open through the same approach. Okay. Now the real question is, that's one other approach actually in the Benchmade world with an axis lock where you're sliding along the back there. A little bit of lubrication actually helps. Oh, yeah, that solved the problem. Putting a little lubrication on the back here allows that little piece to slide more freely into that gap, right? And so, yeah, that solved the problem. Much like on an axis lock, sometimes you got a little vertical blade plate, little lubrication allows the bar to slide further up the tang of the blade there. So the knife is now running great, actually. There is no play in either direction. Falls shut beautifully. Easy to deploy. All right. There we go. Yeah, now I just got to, well, actually, I have been carrying it already. This is one of those examples where I carried the knife for a little while before I got a chance to film Disassembly. But nonetheless, now I just got to write up a review, and it's going to be complicated. There's a lot of good here, and then there's some interesting decisions that we have to deal with, right? So, anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and that you didn't recoil at the sight of seeing this knife work effectively, or something. Bye now.